We are here tonight with Nate Boyer. Thank you so much for being here, Nate.
Of course, no,
It's
my
so great
honor.
to see you.
Good to see you
It's
too.
been a few years.
Certainly, yeah, a decade maybe.
Let's not talk about
Yeah.
that. So we like to give our speakers a chance to brag on themselves as we start. So we'd love for you to, if someone were to stumble across your Instagram or your LinkedIn or just find a highlight reel of you, what would be on it? What are your accolades? There's quite a few.
Ooh, yeah, accolades. I know. I think, I think the best way I would describe it would be, someone who um, grew up as a big dreamer, had a lot of lofty dreams. Many would assume unattainable, but didn't have a lot of confidence. Certainly was hard on myself, and we're all insecure at some point in our lives, and I certainly was as a teenager, and much beyond that. And then at some point, that all sort of shifted in my early 20s because I started putting myself out there. I ended up, the big thing I did was I ended up doing some relief work in the Darfur and completely changed my life. And I came back inspired to do more, to in some sense fight for those that can't fight for themselves, which led me to the military. So I was in the Special Forces for roughly 10 years, and then came to college here at 29 at the University of Texas, and walked onto the football team. It was something I never did, playing football, organized football anyway. A dream of mine, one of those dreams that seemed unattainable, but because I just showed up and put everything I had into it, I made it happen. From there, finished my master's degree, had the opportunity to play for a short time with the Seattle Seahawks, and did that, and then have now co-founded an organization that brings together combat veterans and former professional athletes and helps them find purpose and identity when they lose a uniform, and chasing another dream, which is storytelling, filmmaking, which I am in the throes of right now. So I guess that would be, the highlight reel.
No big deal.
At some level, yeah.
No
It
big deal.
isn't. It really isn't. I'm not. It's hard for sure, but anybody could do it. For the most part.
Yeah, sure.
So we like to get some of the context around our speaker's upbringing. So tell us what life was like as a kid. What were you like growing up?
I like to goof around. I like to have a good time. That certainly wasn't any different as a kid. I was the firstborn in my family anyway. Younger brother and sister, and both my parents worked incredibly hard. They both were the first to go to school in their families, and both got graduate degrees, and worked long hours. So I'm not going to say I raised my brother and sister. I certainly didn't do that, but I did have a big responsibility, a larger responsibility in that way. So I kind of had to, I guess, step up and be a leader. But I got in my fair share of trouble. I loved trouble. I still do. I'm always looking for it. And
Any stories you want to go into there?
The trouble stories? No. I don't know. I mean, a lot of it's really stupid, like whether it's fighting or getting arrested twice at the same store for shoplifting, in a matter of like a couple of months, because it was like, no, they're not going to get me this time. Yeah, they are. Just stupid stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I didn't really apply myself in school because I thought this is not something I want to do with my life anyway. I want to go. We were talking about it in our small group earlier. I want to be Indiana Jones, or play in the NBA or something like that, and just didn't do the work to get to that place anyway. But certainly, always had that sort of dreamer inside of me that wanted to do something big, make an impact, feel like I'm making a difference in some way. And I think that came from a place of insecurity, and feeling like your life doesn't really matter. You're not really doing anything impactful. If you weren't here, everything would be just fine. Like your family might miss you, but what are you really doing? And that shouldn't start. I mean, that's sad when it hits anybody at any age, but that certainly shouldn't start with a young person. It's just too much pressure to put on yourself. You know what I mean? And it's not a good place to be. But I was there, and I still slip back into that from time to time. But I think finding a way to use that also as motivation to go do stuff later on. There was definitely value in that. It is hot. It wasn't hot earlier. Now I'm hot.
Do you want a fan?
Sure.
Does someone want to get
Yeah.
a couple fans for us?
Yeah,
Thank
oh.
you. No, you
Oh,
keep
no, not yours.
It's toasty. So something that I've always admired about you, and we'll get into it.
Is your
I don't
fanning
know if
action.
I can take this seriously. We need someone to come up and fan Nate.
John
Is-
Brandy.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Oh, this is great. Preston, you can just edit these out, right? Fix it in post.
Exactly.
Something that I've always admired about you is, and we'll get into specifics, is you have a very strong sense of what is right and what is wrong, and you fight for that no matter what the stakes are for you. And was there someone in your childhood that shaped that, or was that something you developed on your own over time?
Definitely didn't develop it on my own. I think it was a lot of people. I mean, I was lucky. I think sports always played a big role in my life, whether I was just a fan watching, my heroes on TV or going to games or stuff, but or playing as a young person. And I was lucky to have some bad coaches where you kind of learn not how to act around anybody, much less how to lead. But also some really good ones. And I mean, two of those coaches honestly were my parents too. They didn't coach me in sports, but they were coaches for me. But yeah, just I just remember. I think I was 10 years old in Little League, and we were a terrible team. We were the worst team in the league, and it was like me and my other buddy were the two youngest guys on the team, and we were, the better players. We weren't going to win any games that year, and I remember how dedicated our coaches were to just. It's not that they gave up on us or just thought, well, we're just going to have fun this year. We practiced fundamentals, we practiced all these things, but what was really important to them was like culture building, which is a big thing now in all sports. I mean, everybody talks about a team's culture, but it was like, the idea of just playing for one another and making sure you always have each other's back, and that loyalty and wherever you're doing on the field, like make sure it's in benefit and in service of the team. They just kind of taught these things. And I think these guys were like in college. They were young guys. But I just remember the beginning of the season, we played the best team in the league. We got absolutely slaughtered. And then we played them again at the end of the year, and we still lost, but it came down to like the last batter. And after the game, their coach came over, and that was like the hotshot all-star team. But their coach came over to our dugout and was like, he told us how proud of us he was, you know what I mean? And he was like, I wish, I want to learn, how to coach that into my players, because like it was just a really cool moment. So I think like things like that, I respected that and was very, I think, in tune with that and aware of that. And it was like a role model for somebody that I would want to try to be later in life, and just not focused on the scoreboard, I think, in life, and just focused on being a good person, doing the right thing, no matter what, like the hard right over the easy wrong, which is something that's kind of banged into your head in the military as well, is how important that is. Because if you can't live with yourself and you can't feel good about the effort and all of that, like the result ultimately doesn't matter anyway. I mean, everybody says it's the journey, not the destination, definitely. But it's much more than that. It's just how are you acting as a person? How are you showing up for the people in your life? And yeah, those little choices that you make every day, that's what's really important. That's the people that I remember, and those are the legends to me, you know what I mean?
Well, not needing to look at the scoreboard was probably important when we were at UT. That was
we were
Burn.
we were not good when I was there. We got worse when I left, if that helps. But
I think we're okay now.
Now we're really good, yeah.
Was there a moment when you were growing up that planted the seed for the kind of leadership and service that you ultimately stepped into?
I don't know if there was like, I don't think there was a moment, because it didn't happen really. It didn't really start till I was 23, 24 years old, I think. So it was just a compiling of things over the years. and just watching others. I'm like a late bloomer generally. I mean, obviously I didn't go to college till I was almost 30, but I've always been that way. I've always been slow to try things or to do things. But once I do it, I kind of go all in. I like to like study stuff and kind of learn about it and try to understand how this all works before I like dive in. But once I dive in, like I'm in. That's why I'm 44 and still single. You know what I mean? But like, it's true. I mean, it's just who I am, and that's okay. That's okay. So I don't know if there was certainly a moment. I think if anything, it was just a moment. It was like feeling. I guess maybe, your friends are graduating college and they're starting their lives, and the people, the people you grew up with, and everybody feels like they have a path, and whether that was real or not, it felt like they were on to something, and I wasn't. I was just kind of spinning my wheels and not really putting time and effort into much of anything, and then I just sort of spiraled downward and got so down on myself and such in this hole that I just was like, well, okay, I have two choices here. I can either just stay here and or quit, and then you can frame that however you like, or I can make another decision, which is the complete opposite of what I'm doing, and just pick something, commit to it, and go, like whatever that thing is. And I came across this Time magazine article about what was going on in the Sudan and the Darfur at that time, and it's still going on, but it was sort of the height of a genocide, and they needed relief workers. They needed help. They were like, they had these refugee camps that were just filling with people, and they didn't have enough, they weren't being built fast enough to like accommodate this situation. And I called every NGO, and all of them were like, well, you don't have a college degree, you don't have any special skills, like it's a very long process to even, be able to volunteer. And I just said, well, I'll do anything. Like, what do you mean? Like, you need people. You don't just need doctors. There's a lot more to it. And they're like, no, I understand, but it's complicated. There's bureaucracy behind all of these things. And so, for whatever reason, I think normally I would just be like, well, I guess that's the way it is. And I didn't. I instead said, I'm going to find a way to help. I'm just going to go. I'm just going to show up there. And when I get there, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'll figure it out. And that's sort of what happened. I bought a plane ticket. I flew over there. I didn't know anybody over there. Most people didn't even speak the same language I spoke, but I started talking to people, and anybody I could find that understood me, and tell them what I was doing. And I think my passion, showed through to them, and they would lead me to the next person. And eventually, within a few days, I was out at the refugee camps volunteering. And it just like, once that happened, and I realized that if I just commit and go all in on something like that, like you can kind of do anything. You know what I mean? You have to go for it. And it might not happen as quickly as that did. Most things don't. They take a long time to build, but if you really care about it, if you're passionate about it, like why would you do anything else if that's what you want to, if that's what you're feeling, then do that thing. Life's short. So anyway, it just kind of, the dominoes started falling in that way. Yeah.
So as I was thinking through speakers that I wanted to have come speak for Open Spaces, it's the chair. Yeah, it's not Texas in July. No. I kept coming back to something that happened with you in 2016. So 2 years after we graduated, I think you were 2014 as well,
Yep.
was your involvement with Colin Kaepernick and the NFL and his protests. And I always wanted to talk to you about that, and I probably could have just called you, but we're doing it now here instead. Tell me how that whole entire situation unfolded. What actually happened in that situation?
Yeah. So the year before, I was in Seattle. Had the opportunity to play in one game. It was a preseason game. It was incredible. Just to run out of the tunnel with the American flag and lead the team out like I did in college. This was, something that, it was my dream. It was like a childhood dream to do something like that. And I remember being on the sidelines when the anthem was playing, and I got super emotional because, in 2012, my best friend that I served with in the military passed away. And I was thinking about the people that were still deployed overseas, and I was thinking about, that 13-year-old Nate who, like, would dream about this, but never really thought it was possible. And then it happened. And it was just this really special moment to me. And it wouldn't have been possible without, my time in the military. And I really felt, too, it may not be possible anywhere but here. This is a very imperfect country, don't get me wrong, but it does inspire a lot of people. There is a lot of hope here. We are a beacon of hope to much of the world. And those symbols mean something very special to me because of my attachment to them, because, I enlisted in the military, and I've been handed a folded flag and carried a casket with my best friend in it, draped in one. And these things are just powerful symbols. A year later, in the preseason, is when Colin Kaepernick first started sitting on the bench during the national anthem. I don't want to say in protest of, because that's not what he was protesting, but he was sitting on the bench during the national anthem in protest of police brutality, racial inequality. He felt like, he said, I don't want to stand for the flag of a country that oppresses black people and people of color. He felt, and very strongly, and very many other people did as well, that what that flag is supposed to represent, the country was not living up to those values. And I didn't necessarily disagree with him. I do feel strongly about this place, as I said, and those symbols, and what they are supposed to represent. But if it's not doing what it's meant to do, like, I want to be a part of fixing that too. The Special Forces motto is De Oppresso Liber, which means to free the oppressed. And I feel like if you commit to doing something like that, being a part of a group like that, it shouldn't just be when you're deployed. It should be something maybe you can live by in some way and hopefully be a part of. And so, also, I grew up a 49ers fan, and he was a 49er. And he was, he was, at the time, my favorite player. And this was, this had all kind of came to a head in the media because typically in the NFL, all the players stand on the sideline and put their hand on their heart during the anthem. And Colin was sitting, and he was asked about why, and what I had just told you is what he said. And so I got reached out to by CNN and Fox News and MSNBC and all of the different, major media stations, and they wanted, often what the request was, would you come on our show and debate the topic? Like, they'll have somebody from, they assumed because I was in the military that I was certainly in the, I guess the thinking that everybody out of obligation when this happens should be standing and feeling a certain way. And I was like, I wasn't necessarily that way. I'm like, I don't think anybody should do anything out of obligation. Like, if you don't feel something, don't do it. It's okay. That's what freedom is. I mean, we took the oath to defend the Constitution, which includes the First Amendment, and that is what the First Amendment's all about. At the same time, I would like people to, if they feel compelled to, stand with pride as I do. So I just said, I turned them all down. I said, I don't want to debate that. Like, I think I have a nuanced opinion here, and I think we all should about everything. We should be able to feel the way we do and express that, just like Colin Kaepernick's doing. And that wasn't interesting to them because, that's not going to sell ad space. They'd rather have people fight. So I said no. I ended up writing an open letter through the Army Times, which nobody reads, really. But they let me write whatever I want, and I kind of just wrote it as if I had 5 minutes with Colin, just explaining a little bit of my background, why I feel the way I feel, but also, letting him know that, like, hey, I respect what you're doing, and it takes a lot of courage to do what you're doing, and I look forward to the day that you're inspired to stand for the anthem again. I'll be standing there right next to you. And I signed it, De Oppresso Liber, Nate Boyer. And it went out that night. In the middle of the night, I woke up in the morning and I had a flooded inbox in my email and voicemail, and it just went viral through it was, I guess, Twitter at the time mostly. It had gotten shared started out with some sports media people, and then it just snowballed and it was everywhere. And And one of the people that reached out was Colin's publicist, because they were playing the next day in the final preseason game, and he had said, I'm not going to stand again. I'm going to sit again during the anthem. And she reached out and said, Colin would love to meet you if you're willing. I was in Los Angeles at the time. San Diego was only 3 hours away. And so I went down there and I met with him in the lobby of the team hotel on game day. I'd never met him before. I was super nervous. I was probably sweating as much or more than I am right now. But I think he was too, not nervous to meet me, but just this, what was going on. This is like during, Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton, that election cycle, which, not that things have cooled down at all, but, it was a very divisive time. And we sat down and it was like two guys in a locker room. We weren't talking football, but like, that's kind of was the tone, which is super interesting. We were both like, we joked about stuff and we had a lot in common. And then we talked about, the situation, and he told me his best friend, or one of his best friends, was stationed in Coronado. He was a Navy SEAL, just right down the road from where we were sitting. And he was like, we don't agree on everything, but we talk about it, and we respect one another. And yeah, it was just, it went a lot better than I had, even better than I had hoped. And by the end of the conversation, Colin asked, do you think there's another way I can protest that's not going to offend people in the military? And I was like, nope. Like, no matter what you do, some people will be offended, and that's okay. Like, the intent is not to please everybody. The intent is to make a statement and to get people talking and thinking different, maybe, and action to be taken. I think that's why anybody protests. That's why, we've got protests have been happening this year quite a bit for something different. And, I think the intent is to stop something that's happening or start something, start a movement, in another way. And I thought it through for a few minutes. I didn't have a lot of time, not even that, maybe a few seconds. And I just said, well, to me, this is my opinion. I don't speak for the military or the veteran community. I only speak for myself. But, I think maybe being alongside your teammates would be nice, if there's any way that could work, instead of sort of sitting back on your own, almost like you're not participating. I understand why you're doing it, but that would be maybe something. Maybe some people would be willing to listen to what you're saying more if that was the case. And he said, well, I mean, I agree with you, but I'm not going to stand. Like I said that, I'm committed to that until things start to change. And I said, well, the only thing that maybe makes logistical sense otherwise would be to take a knee, because, that's sort of a flag at half-mast, or people take a knee to pray and propose to their future spouse. And when a player on the field is hurt, out of respect, other players often take a knee. And so to me, I think that's meaningful. And he just kind of agreed. He's like, all right, cool, that's what I'm doing. And I was like, oh, man. And, I'll be completely honest, and I don't tell this story very often to very many people, but I considered kneeling with him for a moment, and I still think about that day, like, what if I would have done that? I don't know if that would have changed more people, but I also didn't feel exactly as he felt on the topic. I did feel differently. I did feel, certain, there's nuance to everything, of course, but I felt, for me, maybe if I just stood next to him with my hand on my heart, as I always do, but showing that I co-sign off, I sign off on this. Not that my signature means anything, or, I have any authority in the matter, but that, like, I agree that I think this is a important thing that we should be discussing and fixing together as a society. And so I stood next to him that night while he knelt, and the thing that sticks out to me more than anything in that moment was the booing from the crowd. I thought, that is so much more disrespectful to people in the military, I think, or to anybody, to Americans, than taking a knee because you want the country to heal in some way. Anyway, that was a very long answer. Sorry.
No, thank you. Thank you.
How did it feel for you going through that? How did it feel internally? Was there anything that was particularly disorienting or painful about that time?
I mean, it was like, I just remember being like nervous and kind of scared, but then I would check myself out of that because I'd be like, think about him. You know what I mean? Like what he is risking as a football player, as a human being, as a public figure. You know, that I had, I had guys I served with, that I deployed with. And one of these guys, you know, he got shot a couple of times. He's, you know, obviously survived, but um, that reached out to me and just said I was a disgrace to the Green Beret. And like that really hurt. You know what I mean? And I honestly was like, I respect your opinion. You know, I don't want to hear that. That obviously that obviously affects me still today. But so I was like, you know what? I'm not going to argue with him. I'm not going to argue this because you know he's hurting too, obviously, and there's something that matters to him because he, you know, he lost a lot more than I did on the battlefield and whatnot. So it was like, yeah, those kind of things. That was really challenging. But every time that happened, I was like, but you know, I'm really risking nothing as compared to so many others, and I haven't lost anything as compared to many others. Not just people in the military, you know, the people that Colin was essentially taking a knee for, and it's not just, it wasn't just that small, you know, small-ish group of people who, you know, had lost their lives when they shouldn't have. It was so much more than that, you know, that he was quote unquote standing for because he wasn't standing. Do you know what I mean? But it was like, yeah, that kind of those things really stick out for sure. Yeah.
And so, as you alluded to, you were thrust into this media spotlight. You were getting attacked.
I kind of got thrust myself a little bit.
Sure.
You know, I made that
You stepped in.
I made that decision.
You
yes.
stepped in, and you were getting attacked from every angle. As you mentioned, the media likes to make things inflammatory. You were getting a lot of, I'm sure, messages, tweets, emails, calls. What was the emotional impact, and how did you get through the day-to-day of that really intense time?
Well, you know, I think in some way I was grateful because it was impactful. It was an impactful time. I wasn't grateful that like those things had happened or that people felt so divided, but I was like, and I still think we haven't gotten there yet, but you know, I think change is very hard, but it's super important, you know? I mean, we can't, that's how we develop, you know, and grow as a society. Things have to change. Like, it's just the way it is. And so, yeah, like a lot of that stuff, I mean, it hurt when it was people that I respected, right? Which was rare. It didn't happen that much. There was so many more people that did reach out, and I didn't appreciate this enough at the time, but I do now. That were like, you know, I felt all this way about this thing or all that way, and now I feel, I understand. I still disagree. I still think that's wrong, but I get where that person is coming from. And you helped me by you stepping in. You helped me get there, and that meant a lot to me. But yeah, you know, it's hard. Like a lot of my family is one way, and a lot of my family is very much another way. And there was even conversations between family members without me in the middle of it that were not great. Maybe necessary. You know what I mean? Probably necessary. I think ultimately it brought some of those people closer together, but also like, you know, feeling like it's like it's my fault, you know, being hard on myself in that way. That certainly affected me, but definitely a net positive, I think, for my own growth too, and just to make that decision, similar to jumping on the plane when I was 23, you know, to just go. Like you feel this thing, it's pulling at you. It's very strong. Just, you know, write that letter, and you know, maybe nobody would have read it, but it still would have done something for me. You know, it certainly would have. It was good for me to do. It was a good exercise just for me to do. Anyway.
How do you hold on to that truth? Your name is suddenly in the headlines. You're under the spotlight to a degree. People are projecting their beliefs onto you and your actions, etc. How do you steadfast in that truth?
Oh man, I mean, if you're not honest, you're gonna get exposed at some point. It just happens, you know. And And so like that was something that always kind of stuck with me. And there's still, certainly didn't handle everything perfect. I said things at times. I made, you know, I remember I was interviewed on TV one time, and you know, like I said, I like to joke around, and I said something that was so stupid. It was so stupid, and I got called out for it, and I deserved it, and I apologized. But I'll tell you what I said, and it was on an ESPN show, and the individual interviewing me was talking. This was right after George Floyd on the protests, or right during all of that. And Colin, Kaepernick hadn't spoken up at that time. He hadn't said anything. It's like, look, the guy had already done a lot, and that's a hard. Like I said, I can't even imagine what it had to have been like for him through that time. And the guy asked me, he said, "Why do you think?" So dumb. Why do you think Colin has, chosen to remain silent? And I said, well, he has the right to remain silent, as a joke, Yeah, exactly. Bad idea. So like there was a lot of things like that, because that's who I am. That is my personality. And there was people that thought that was funny, and there was a lot of people that thought that was really inappropriate. And I respect that. You know what? It wasn't worth a laugh. I shouldn't have said it. I shouldn't have done those things. So like, I think, but you have to own that. When you do that, you have to own it, and you have to go. I called the guy that asked me the question. I didn't even know him before. I tracked him down because I could tell when I said it, he was like, whoa, like, it didn't make him feel good. And so I called and I said, hey man, and we had a great conversation. He was like, dude, I understand. He's like, it is kind of funny, but it's just not okay to say in that moment. I'm like, I know, especially not right now. And yeah, so it's like, you just have to lean on that. You have to lean on just being open, being honest, being vulnerable. That's what I think good leaders do, I hope. And when you make a mistake, man, you got to own it. You can't skirt around it. You can't try to, make an excuse for it. It is what it is. We all do it. We all make mistakes. And when you put yourself in a spotlight like I did, they're elevated, and certainly, certainly, you gotta be honest, but you also, you gotta be respectful of everybody, as much as you can.
So you put yourself out there, and you received, there was a lot of positive feedback, but there was also the negative, and it was, I imagine, kind of a whirlwind. And then as you're coming out of that, how do you even begin to process all of that and even figure out what you learned and start to heal from that rupture, that experience? And if you had to, we always ask people at Open Spaces, if you have to narrow it down to 3 ways that you healed or processed or came out of that, what would those 3 things be?
Oh man, I think, well, the 3 things that stick out, because I have thought about this a lot, and going right back to what you just said, Alex, like the number one thing is like honesty. You just gotta be honest, and you gotta be honest with yourself first. You gotta be honest. I think you have to be clear, clear about what you're saying, what you're standing for, and which means you got to do a lot of research and educate yourself and learn and listen to people, and you got to be specific. I think about whatever that thing is. Like it's got to be specific what you are doing right now. And I struggle with that professionally. I struggle with that all the time. People are like, what do you want to do, or what's your dream? And I'm like, well, maybe kind of this, and it's not a good answer. It's not a good answer. But at in that moment, in those times, those were things I had to latch onto and certainly learned. But also learning that things just take a long time, and you have to be patient. You have to be steadfast in what you're doing, and just stick to it. And if it adjusts a little bit, if the universe pulls you in a different way, or if you learn something that opens up a new avenue or channel or whatever, then you need to go to explore that as well. And just like anything, you get your college degree in X, you don't have to do X. It's okay. You know what I mean? You can shift. But you got to hold true to those things. And for me, it was, just that honesty, clarity, and specificity was super important if you do want things to get better and get out of that place eventually.
Were there any unexpected sources of strength and kind of healing for you at that time, or clarity?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely opened up conversations I never thought I would have with friends and family, because a lot of, my family, I love my family to death, but we just don't talk about stuff like that. We just don't, kind of stay away from that. It's important stuff. Not that you need to talk about stuff like that all the time, but like, I think it was good for my mom. My mom, who we don't see eye to eye on a lot, but that woman is incredibly loyal, and she will have my back no matter what, even if she just like totally disagrees with me, and that's love. Like, that's really important. As long as I'm not doing something that's, harmful to other people, or something that's just sort of, objectively wrong. She's a very supportive person in that way. We're very similar in that way, very stubborn, but those, developing those type of relationships in my life with people that I considered close to me, but I guess discovered they weren't really that close to me, or not as close as we could have been, because we didn't really know a ton about each other in that way, like what we really felt about the way things were going in society and the world, and we just kind of never talked about those things. And so that's a big one that sticks out. Yeah.
What advice do you have to even start having those conversations with friends? Maybe it's your guy friends, or your teammates, or your coworkers. How do you even start that?
That is such a good question. And it's obviously hard. It's uncomfortable. I mean, uncomfortable conversations are self-explanatory. But they are important. I mean, again, to grow in any way, you have to go through discomfort. You go to the gym and you want to, gain muscle, you got to tear it. That's how it builds. It's weird, but that's just how it works. And so you got to take the Band-Aids off in some ways. And I think it's important, if it's a heavy topic of some type that you want to get into, or you want to explore with somebody, to talk with somebody, it's very important to, I think, listen first, and really get a feel for like what's important to this person, and why do they feel that way? What's happened in their life that led them to this place? Because I think that, if you start talking at somebody or trying to teach somebody a lesson, I know I'll shut down quick, if somebody comes at me in that way. And maybe that's not okay for me to be like that, but I understand that. But if somebody truly wants to understand me, and then wants to be understood in turn, if it's reciprocal like that, I'm in, you know what I mean? And I think a lot of people are that. So like, I think honoring people, no matter where they are, it is important. First and foremost, to have that respect, and to kind of offer that olive branch. And but those conversations are important. If we want to move forward as a unit, as a society, a civilization, like, we do have to understand each other, I think, and we do have to work together, and find as much common ground as we can. And as things, if you look back in history, there's plenty of times, whether it's American history or world history, where there was, and sometimes it was even maybe a majority or a large group of people, that we look back on it now, and everybody pretty much today agrees that was wrong. You know what I mean? Like, that wasn't okay, but all these people, they believed it, and they were bought in, and so you can't necessarily blame all of those people, for feeling that way. They were maybe raised in that and brought up in that system or society, and didn't know any better, and they were told things that were not true about other people and other places. And, you see it all the time, especially see it all the time today with social media. I mean, I can't imagine what it would be like to grow up as a young person in this era. Couple it with the COVID and all of this stuff. Man, how important is it to have face-to-face interactions, opportunities like this, to get to know total strangers on a deep level in some ways. Just those little questions. It wasn't the most deep things. They were icebreakers, but at the same time, like, I know certain things about those people that I don't know about my family, which is kind of crazy, But that's
Get ready for the 4s and 5s at dinner.
Okay, good. I'm psyched.
Looking back at that time now, has your understanding of that chapter evolved at all or changed?
I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question. I think my it's one of those things where like, you know, the more you know, the less you understand. In a way, like the more things you're aware of, you're just like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that existed. That's a whole world that I know nothing about. So I think there's a lot of that going on with me, maybe right now too. And yeah, I'm still hopeful. I'm certainly no less optimistic than I was that things can and will get better. I'm very much in the thinking that because I mean every species at their core survival is like number one, right? So I feel like out of necessity we will get through this somehow, like this, you know, and find a way to come together more, and also like recognizing that there are at the same time incredible advancements occurring, and like we are still developing. We're not regressing completely. You know what I mean? We are maybe going sideways in certain ways. So I don't know. It's yeah. As I look back and think about that time, I think initially I maybe ignorantly thought that something would just magically change overnight a bit, you know, or like a big shift. And you see that when you have, you know, large protests and people coming together and stuff like that. But like now, maybe I'm a tad more pessimistic when I see that stuff, and I'm just like, what are you gonna follow through though? Are you gonna do something tomorrow and the next day? And is it just gonna be this, or what are you gonna change in your life so that this problem gets solved? Like what, you know, not just raise awareness always. Like what's the next step, you know? So I'm big on that with myself, making sure that if I'm going to say something or stand for something, I need to like continue to follow through. It's not just nobody's going to fix the problem for me. It's not just going to change on its own, you know.
You mentioned that you might be a little bit more pessimistic than you were back then. Do you still feel like you have an optimistic outlook on our society? And how do you hold on to that and cultivate that every day when you turn on the news and it's the next thing and the next thing?
I don't turn on the news.
There we go.
No, I mean, I definitely am still, I'm still optimistic. I really am. And look, I'm also aware that as we get older, the younger generation they always have it easier, and they're always, I mean, that's just, I'm becoming that old crusty guy too. But I'm aware of it, at least. I hope so. I hope I'm as aware of it as I think I am. Because I also meet a lot of young people that I'm just like, oh my gosh, that person is miles, years beyond where I was at their age, or even just a few years ago, with their, you know, intelligence and thoughtfulness and awareness and sensitivity to things. Like, so that's like getting to meet those people and be around those people is really special. We talked about this before, not here, but you know, and maybe you're planning on getting to this anyway. But I'm working on this documentary right now, right? And it's around the 80th anniversary of D-Day, which happened last June. And we're interviewing, you know, these people that were there, that landed on Omaha Beach 80 years ago, and now they're, you know, some of them are 105, and they're still pretty sharp. And the ones that have made it that long, who went through some really traumatic stuff, the common thread with them that I found is optimism. Like they are optimistic and hopeful, and they're still, you know, crusty old guys, sure, but in their heart and at their core, they are optimistic. And then we interviewed a lot of young people too, that were the ages of those people when they had to go, you know, serve in World War II. And a lot of them, maybe not as optimistic, but very thoughtful, and like are maybe they are optimistic. Maybe they're just not saying it. But the way that they live their lives feels like they're not just throwing in the towel. They feel like it's on them. It's their responsibility to carry the torch and to get things back on the right track, whatever that looks like. And so like that's inspiring to see and hear. You know, when I meet someone that's half my age or younger, and they're just like they're very, because I didn't care at all at that age. You know, I was tuned out to all that stuff. I was like, it's just my world, you know, my little bubble. And there's a lot of people that aren't like that right now, probably because of social media and this stuff. So like, hey, you know.
Flip side of the coin.
What kind of courage do you think the world is asking for right now? What do you think it needs?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I think man, it needs it needs a lot. It needs people to continue, yeah, like I guess like I mentioned a bit, continue to follow through on the things that they say and stand for, and kind of show up every day. It needs people, yeah, we'll go back to social media, who are willing to say things on social media maybe, or, you know, or share about a cause or something, to take action and like physically be there and get involved. And maybe it's a complete career shift, you know, for those people. Because I think there's a lot of people out there today, maybe this is all the time, but I'm aware of it more today than normal, that just they're not happy with what they're doing. They don't find fulfillment. Maybe they're making money, maybe they're not even making money. And there's just something missing. There's just something missing in them. And they got to find that thing. So I think it's really important for people to try things. You know, I think we need to try things, and continually get out of your comfort zone, and have a conversation with somebody that you probably disagree with, or go to those areas or parts of the country or the world or your neighborhood that you don't usually frequent, you know, and just explore a little bit and don't get so comfortable in the same routine and rut. I think it's really necessary right now.
So what's lighting you up right now? What is your next chapter? What are you working on now?
Yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate to be able to direct my first movie 3 years ago. Well, it came out almost 3 years ago, called MVP, about the organization that I spoke about briefly, about the charity. You know, it was essentially based on a Marine who was living in a homeless shelter and a former NFL player, first year out of the league, and they're going through the same struggles of losing the uniform, losing their identity, transitioning, trying to figure out, who am I now? Like, I felt so alive doing this thing, or I felt the sense of purpose, and I had the camaraderie and the adrenaline and all these things, and now I'm like, I don't even know who I am anymore. And I think the message behind that was it wasn't just for or about athletes and veterans. It was just about, you know, people and going through stuff and losing people in your life, or things in your life, or, you know, shedding something that you know, your former skin, in a sense. And I think that the process of making that was really hard. We had like no money for a movie, but we made it happen, and there was a lot of people that helped out and jumped in on that, and that is really inspiring to me. I want to keep being a part of telling stories, because I think there's even in the small stories out there, it doesn't always have to be these big crazy things, or big crazy stories that we're telling. It can be little things, because and sometimes that's the most important. Those are the things that I relate to often, the things that maybe nobody knows about me, that I'll watch in a film, or I'll read in a book, that connects to me and kind of helps me to feel like I'm not alone. So I think that is something that is continually lighting me up, that storytelling. But also I'm always looking for that next thing to be involved in, you know, something that I'm passionate about, that can help make the world a better place, at least in my eyes. And so, yeah, I'm trying to keep that open mind and listen for that, because it's hard. I mean, it's hard to also feel like, maybe like I do feel sometimes in that past situation with Colin Kaepernick and everything, like, did I overstep? You know, did I inject myself into this situation where maybe it wasn't needed? And then I think, well, you know, it certainly changed me, and I think it helped some people maybe change their thinking. So, okay, maybe that was good, but if something comes up again, how do I do that again without feeling like I'm just jumping into something, or trying to co-opt a message or whatever, which I'm not in the business of hijacking something from somebody. I don't want to do that. So it's I don't know. I'm kind of in that place right now. Like, I'm open to whatever that is, and that's, yeah, it's kind of scary, but because I don't know where the next the next thing's coming from, the next job or whatever. But I do enjoy what I'm doing and what I'm pursuing. I think I definitely feel contentment in that.
I do want to ask, if you were to go back 9-10 years, would you do anything differently?
I don't think so.
Mm.
And I think that would be hard to. Yeah, I mean, maybe sure, little things I wish I wouldn't have said in certain situations, right? Sure, plenty of that, or things I wish I would have maybe said at a time where I just chose to say to not say anything. When somebody said something that I was like, maybe I should intervene here and let them know why it's maybe hurtful to that person to act that way or to say that thing, and I didn't, right? So maybe things like that. But I think, as far as our conversation went in the lobby of the team hotel, I don't know. I can't even remember most of it. It is a blur. But, like, I don't think I would change anything there. I think I would have suggested the same thing if you asked me that question again. Thank God that I wherever that came from, just sort of came out of me, because it was the truth. It was what I honestly felt, and it just kind of happened, like, in the moment. And I'm grateful that he listened and then did it, Like, that's crazy. It's kind of crazy. Like, it was very, very, very courageous of him. But yeah, as far as that situation goes, like, I think I would hope that I would do it again. I should say that. I would hope that I would have, because maybe I've got more to lose now. I don't know. So maybe I would be more afraid of doing that again. I hope I would still have the integrity to say the same thing,
Right, because I think what keeps a lot of people from speaking up on things that they may care about is the fear of not doing it perfectly. So it actually, I think, is really impactful that you're like, yeah, I could have done things a little better, but I wouldn't change anything.
Right.
That's an important message.
Even the open letter, I wrote that thing in like an hour and a half, and it's not short.
You didn't have ChatGPT then.
No, we didn't have ChatGPT. Yeah, I had a glass of wine, and I sat down, and I just typed it up and sent it in, and they were like, you can get final edit on this. I'm like, cool. No one's going to read it anyway. Crazy, but, hey.
All right, should we go to Q&A?
Well, yes, before we do that, so if you have any questions for Nate, think of them now. And a tradition at Open Spaces is our previous guest leaves a question for our current guest. So our last guest, Alex Bradley, wants to know, what is the first thought you have when you wake up in the morning before the day starts?
Oh, man, I wish I had a better answer than this. But, like, can I lay here for 5 more minutes is honestly the first thought.
It's so nice to know that even a former Green Beret wants to sleep
I'm not an early riser. I am when I have to be.
Yeah.
And, like, I can get up and I'll be good. Whether I got a full night's sleep or not, I'll be okay. I know I'm going to be okay. But now my first thought is, like, and it's not because I'm like, oh, I don't want to face today. It's just, I know how quickly I'll get on that damn phone, and I'll just. Trip knows. Trip's one of my really good friends, and I'm like, I am way too tethered to that thing. It's it's something I have not committed to working on. That's why it's not getting that much better. By the way, congratulations, Trip, new baby.
Woo!
17 days old.
Aww.
His lovely wife Kara is at home and let Trip come out with us, hang out tonight. But anyway. Yeah, that's the truth.
5 more minutes.
That's can I sleep? Can I just lay here not even sleep, just lay here in silence for 5 more minutes.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Nate. Thank you for being honest and vulnerable and open about that chapter in your life.
Of course.
It's important.
Thank you guys for having me.
All right. Does anybody have a question for Nate? I'll come down and give you the microphone.
So you've spent a lot of time working in high-performance teams as part of the Green Beret and then as part of the NFL. What's a skill that you can teach all of us so that we can all be a high-performance team together?
Man, that's a great one. Well, I think, look, teams are made up of individuals, and it's really important to make sure you are taking care of your responsibilities first. You know what I mean? And that's a great one for, leaders too. because the leaders are often quick to correct, and manage and do those things that, yeah, at times they need to do. But if they're, what's not straight, like, no one's going to follow them, A, and B, the team's going to fall apart, right? But I think everybody can be a leader in that way, every member of a team in that way. So it's like, yeah, I thought about, or that makes me think about when I walked on to Texas, right? I walk on the football team. It was my favorite sport growing up. I loved football. I watched it like crazy. My mom didn't let me play when I was young, and then by the time I probably could have, I was clinging on to my starting spot on the basketball team and on the baseball team. I didn't want to lose that. And I was also probably just afraid, like, what if I get cut? What if I ride the bench? I don't want to look stupid. So I didn't play, and it was a huge regret that I had for years. So finally I go do it. I walk on to Texas. I don't have the speed or the skill or the size or the youth or the talent, whatever, probably the smarts even, to like figure out how to play wide receiver or safety, something that I'm probably the right size for. So what did I do? I found the most thankless job in football, which is long snapping. Nobody wants to long snap. It's not cool. It's not fun. It's, for those that don't know, it's a guy that hikes it between his legs on punts, field goals, and extra points. Nobody cares about you unless you screw up, and then your name's in the paper for all the wrong reasons. So, like, why would you want to do that? And I'm like, because I want to play, and I want to be, and I feel like maybe I should share my voice in the locker room. I'm older than a lot of these, well, all of these guys, and I did some other things in my life, but if I'm not playing in the game, if I'm not in the trenches at some level too, maybe I shouldn't be speaking up. So I decided to do that. Never long snapped the ball before, but I was patient with myself, and I started out, I'm going to snap 100 balls a day, and I'm going to watch these videos, and I'm going to learn how to get the grip right, and then the stance, and then where am I aiming, and then the spiral of the football, and then the speed. And it took a while to get there, and I sucked at it from a couple of months where it was just like I wouldn't even want to show anybody. I was doing it in secret, you know what I mean? Because I didn't want people judging me or whatever. But I just committed to it, and I did that, and then I eventually got to that place. And then once you're doing that, and once I got that starting job, then in the games when I'm in there, like realizing how important this little thankless job is, because if I don't do this right, if that snap's not perfect, it's going to affect the punter, and then it's going to affect the punt, and then it's going to affect our field position, and then the other team may score, and it's going to affect the game at large. Like everything matters. Everything matters, Like in the grand scheme of life, maybe nothing matters, which is kind of weird, but to think about like both of those objections, I guess. But yeah, they all those little things, they do matter. Those little details. But that's how high performance teams operate. When it's in the military, it's absolutely that way because it's life and death. You know what I mean? It's every inch, every move. It all matters. So, yeah.
Thank you, Nate. Thank you, Robert. Anyone else? Question? Alberto?
Hey, thank you for sharing, Nate.
Thank you.
You had mentioned when you were walking on the field with the Seattle Seahawks that you had thought back of that 13-year-old Nate that would have never even dreamed of that being possible.
He would dream, he just didn't believe it.
There you go. They didn't believe it would
Right.
be possible,
Right.
And obviously serving in the Green Beret was very formative and instilled a lot of confidence in you. My question is, aside from that, and obviously that was a big part of it, but what helped you get to that point of, I believe it. I believe that I can do it, because it is obviously very critical to be able to believe that in order to make it real.
Here's the secret. And Tripp can attest to this because Tripp was also in the special operations community. We are a bunch of idiots too. No one really knows what they're doing. Anybody, if they committed to it, could do that, right? And I think that realization of like, yes, this is we are high performing because we practice so much. We put the time in and the commitment, but like we're not special. I know it's called special forces, but we're really not. Like maybe what's special about us is that we were just crazy enough to think that we could, or I guess not even think that we could do it. We weren't so worried about the failure of it. Like if we don't make it, if we get cut, or if we were just like, so what? like we're all gonna die, and that's very sad, but that's the truth. And like the last thing I want, the biggest fear I have is regret. Like I don't want to, whether it's tomorrow or in 50 years, I don't want to be laying there in my final moments being like, oh my gosh, like, why didn't I just try that thing? Why didn't I have that conversation with my mom or whatever it is? Like, why did I let that voice in my head dictate, that voice in my head that is not even real? I'm listening to it. I'm making that choice to listen to it. Why did I let that dictate, the decisions that I made? But it was really that time. I remember thinking that, like, I'm here. I'm still kind of an idiot, I think, but I'm part of this, and people do respect me and look up to me and rely on me, and I do have responsibility now. And the way that this came to be was I signed up, I volunteered, I filled out the forms, I took the tests, I did the best that I could, and I got past that next thing and the next thing, and eventually I earned that Green Beret, and now I'm here and I'm doing this job, but and you talk to other people, and it's like so much imposter syndrome in that community. The insecurity is hilarious, but they also are committed to this thing, and it's like I will, for the man on my left and right and the woman on my left and right, I will do whatever it takes, and I'm committed to that. And so once I was like just fully on board and believed that I think maybe everything is like this, that's when it was just like, well, the worst that's going to happen with the football thing is I won't make the team. I'll get cut. But I'm sure going to regret it if I don't try. I'm always going to wonder, what if. And so it was just as simple as that. And I think that is like one of the great tragedies in humanity. And yes, there are disabilities people face, physical, mental, otherwise. Like there are some barriers for certain people, but there's other things that they can do and they should do. You know what I mean? And they're talented in other ways that maybe I'm not. And so I just think that we're all capable of doing pretty much anything. We just have to try. We just have to go for it. And yeah, I mean, there's plenty of things I've done that we didn't talk about today that were not accolades, like the opposite, just things that I tried, and it was either not into it, or I just wasn't. I just didn't make it. I didn't make that thing, and that's all right. What's next? There's plenty of other things that I think I'm passionate about, and that I can do that to make a difference and to make me feel like I am making that impact that I didn't feel like I was making at 23 even. So you got this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alberto.
Thank you.
We'll do one more if anyone has one question. Nicole?
All right, Nate, I just got to know, were you inspired by Jerry Maguire the night that you sat down and wrote the letter and woke up to all
Oh
that
my
activity
God.
in the morning?
Well, ironically, I mean, I was not at the time, but I remember thinking about it later, and I'm like, that's really interesting because I was also 35. I don't know if you remember that. If you know the movie well, I do know Jerry Maguire well. He was like, I'm 35. I was 35 years old. I had started my life, is what he says in the movie. And yeah, I wasn't in the moment. I definitely wasn't thinking, but I thought about it later, and that I guess that there was a bit of a parallel there. But yeah, I think similarly, he just kind of he didn't have a glass of wine. He had 2 slices of bad pizza. Is what he says in the movie. And he wrote the memo or the manifesto or whatever it was to the business he worked at in the company about like putting people first and all of that. But that's super interesting. No, I wasn't in the moment, but I do love that movie.
Okay. I love knowing you're the same age, too.
Yeah, exactly. I was 35 years old. In some ways, I'd started my life.
Yes.
Thank you, Nicole. All right. So thank you so much, Nate. That was
Thank you, Kate.
fantastic. And thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Alex, as well, brother.